All right, so let's jump right in. First question, what have we learned about the need for quality virtual instruction in the P-12 environment? And I would love to open this question up to Lisa first.
I think the thing that we've learned about quality virtual instruction is being able to provide the appropriate resources, right? It's all about being able to be flexible, being adaptable, and making sure that these students have access to the resources that they need in order to get the work that they need to get done. But I really do think that as far as quality virtual instructions, you need passionate teachers and people who know how to find things.
Yeah, great. So we need those educators and we need access. And that's what virtual instruction is allowing us to do. We have a greater candidate pool than we've ever had before, because now we're no longer bound to who can drive into our campus. And we also have greater access, more access than we've ever had before, because everything is at our fingertips. It does sometimes pose some problems because now we're competing for attention with students when they're using the device to learn, when they could very well just click another button and use it to play a video game. So why choose to show up to your class when they have access to some very entertaining alternatives? But part of that is having those relationships and setting those expectations and just being able to be the teacher that every student deserves, so they choose to come to your class every day. Perfect. So let's hear from somebody else. Melanie, what would you like to add to that?
My mute button didn't want to unmute. I don't think there is, for me as a first year virtual teacher, because I've always taught in person. So this being my first year with PLI, I noticed that there is just always the same theme of communication with students about who you are as a person. That is vital to really help develop these relationships so you can understand who they are. So even with my students being virtual, one thing that I worked on with them is having those one-on-one non-academic check-ins, whether it was weekly or bi-weekly, having that opportunity to talk. Because one thing we know is that we can't take a student outside and have a conversation, or we can't see them in the hallways as we would normally in person. So how can we create those connections with our students so that we can have the leverage needed in order to push them to the next level of learning and understanding? So for me, really getting to know them on a one-on-one basis, using Remind was a really big thing. And so communication and being very intentional about utilizing that within your teaching learning practices, just as you would plan a test every week or you would plan a review at the end of your week, plan in those times where to your students one-on-one, just about who they are as people, because we are people who are teaching, and we need to understand that they are students who are learning, not just products of this system of education, but we are humans operating in this system, and we need that human connection the best we can with a virtual platform.
Oh, that's so well put. I love that. And to take it one step further, it's not just about recognizing the need for human connection for students to teachers, but also teachers to other teachers. Oftentimes in the virtual world, we're hearing so many teachers feel that they are on an island. They feel like they're doing this alone because they don't have connection. They don't have that teacher workroom or teacher lounge where they can go decompress or talk about what's going on and ask their fellow teachers what's working, what's not working. But we still are in this together as a team. Our PLCs look a little different probably, but it doesn't mean that they don't exist anymore. And understanding how to continue to foster and cultivate those relationships with our colleagues, also really important, because we know about this mass exodus that's happening right now, right? With teachers across the country. It is not a fun place for a lot of people who are really struggling with how to manage what their own needs are and what the tools and resources they have available to them are. So great perspective on that. Thanks so much, Melanie.
Can I add to your point that you just made, April, about having that connection with the other colleague? I think it's important for us as PLI teachers to make sure that we reach out to the TAs. I had a recent change where one of the teacher assistants left and another one came in, and I just took the initiative to reach out to her, introduce myself, and she said, I appreciate that, because I don't hear that from some of the, other people that are with proximity. You're the only one that's connected with me, And I know that we're busy and we have things going on, but making that extra step to connect with our teacher assistants so that we can see and get to know our students holistically from their eyes as well as from our experience, I think is a really vital step. So I'm glad you brought up that even teacher to teacher, human to human as adults, that connection is important too.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Catherine, do you have any final thoughts on this slide before we move on?
I just think the word that's missing from that is live quality virtual instruction. The previous year, what I like to call the COVID year, and a lot of teachers were forced to trying to do asynchronous and weren't maybe meeting with the students as often, whereas the ones face to face, they were still seeing every day. I really feel that the live virtual instruction that we offer, I am a big supporter of instant feedback in a classroom. A student who gets feedback 2-3 days later does not have a greater understanding of a student who can access that straight away.
Perfect. Yeah, really great insight on that. Thank you. We do have a couple of questions in the Q&A. I'm going to continue moving on. Please know that we see those questions. We're going to see if a few more of these slides will help answer some of those questions for you. And if not, we'll definitely come back to them. So how has virtual instruction helped to level the playing field for all students? This time, let's start with Catherine.
Okay, it's reaching students that may not have had the opportunity to have quality education. Students who are able to get access, obviously, to in maybe rural communities, or students who have medical issues, who weren't able to attend before the pandemic. And now, obviously, that has only increased their chances of not being able to attend. Again, we're moving away from asynchronous, which is good, and it's given that live quality education to students in areas that weren't necessarily able to access that before.
Perfect. Yeah, Lisa, anything to add?
So I work with students in West Virginia, many of whom do have medical issues, but I also have students in brick and mortars schools where there are no teachers because of that mass exodus that is currently taking place. And I feel like it's helping so much. That PLI is helping to get that education to them in a way that they would not otherwise be getting, because I mean, otherwise they're stuck in a teacher with subs or with unqualified, you know, I mean, here they've been trying to get parents to substitute. So it's kind of a huge deal. And I love the fact that even in our district where I live, they are using PLI as a resource to get that live instruction to the students. So I really do feel like this is helping level the playing field.
Absolutely. Melanie, any final thoughts on this one? Okay.
No, they covered it. They did a good job.
Perfect. Well, how about, will you start this one for us, Melanie? How important is it to have diverse educators when ensuring equitable instruction for all students?
Representation is a really, really big part of culturally responsive teaching. And so for oftentimes our students need to see educators who look like them or have a diverse lens from different cultures. I think it's very important because you can understand the culture that the students come from. You can understand the parenting styles a bit better. There is an opportunity for us to stop any kind of blaming of certain cultural ways that we don't understand, because if I'm a part of that culture, or if I'm from a diverse culture that understands what it means to be otherized or to be marginalized or to be pushed aside because we are not of the dominant culture here in America, it gives us that connection. So I think it's vital to students. I was looking at the young lady who created Abbott Elementary, and she showed that show is actually named after her 6th grade teacher. She was on Jimmy Kimmel, and the teacher popped up and looked so much like her. And this teacher, she never forgot, so much so that she's created a hit show right now after this teacher's last name. So I think that's really important to understand that diverse educators really bring in that spirit of representation that students need, even if they're not of that race. Like, students need to see a myriad of cultures when they come across teachers. I just think it's important.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Lisa, anything to add?
I coming from a Hispanic family, I absolutely agree with everything Dr. Battles had to say, because sometimes, I mean, you need that diversity in order to be able to relate to them, because they might just look at you and say, oh, yeah, no. But then once you can get on their level and say, hey, I'm just like you. I came from a family background just like yours. So I understand what you're going through, what your culture is, and it helps you to relate to them better. And even if you're not from the same culture, you get to relate even like as a collectively better with your students, as you know, as far as diversity in education goes, as diverse educators are concerned. I think it's very important to have educators of that are diverse in all of the classrooms.
Absolutely. I feel like being able to let students know, I see you. I might have a similar story to you. It's not the same story, but I have something in common with you. I know when I was in the classroom, I grew up in a bicultural home. My mother is from Iran, and so I'm half Persian. She spoke 4 languages. English was her last one. And my dad was in the military. And so we definitely had one of those upbringings of, we've got a militaristic father and a mother from the Middle East. Like, that's a big clash. And so being able to just let my students know sometimes, like if they felt like nobody gets me, I'll be like, nobody gets you. Let's talk about what my house looks like. But being able to make those connections with them, just let them know that you are also human and that we are all going through a story. And our story is very unique to us. And we've got so much to bring to the table because of it. So I love that idea of being able to let your students know you see them. I see your story, and I can not always relate to your story, but I get it. So Catherine, do you have anything to add?
I think it's important that they're there as well to be role models, you know, to show people that you can achieve anything, you can dream anything, and there is a bigger world out there. As I said, I've taught in quite a lot of rural schools, teaching about the beach, and they've never seen the sea. You know, coming from a different country and moving into America, I feel like I do have a lot more insight to what it's like outside, and there is a bigger world out there. And I think having people from diverse backgrounds and different cultures really opens students' eyes to those possible opportunities.
Oh yeah, so true. Letting them know. That was one of my favorite mantras as a teacher, is the world is so much bigger than you know. There's so much out there. So what's something you wish someone would have prepared you for when you first started to teach virtually? Who wants to start?
I can go first. For me, I think back to my first, this is not technically my first year teaching virtually. I did support my teachers a lot in the first year of the pandemic. But for me at PLI, I wish I had all the students' login details down. I didn't get access to those straight away that first week, but I remember it taking a good 2 or 3 days just to get students access into Canvas, for example. Whereas if I would have had those emails and login details, I feel those first few days would have gone smoother. And then we would have been able to, you know, kind of jump right into student orientation. We did a lot of getting to know each other those first few days to try and solve the technical issues. But yeah, definitely having access to those resources would have been great in the beginning.
Perfect. Yeah, for sure. What else? Anything else?
I say for me, I think one thing I could have been prepared for more is there oftentimes is a disconnect between what we are as PLI instructors expected to do versus what the schools may expect us to do. And so there's often a disconnect between their expectations of us as teachers. Sometimes you may get a school that thinks that you are the resource and the person there is the actual teacher, or it could be a situation where you don't have, one thing I didn't really prepare for mentally is like that disconnect from parents. Like I'm a big parent connection type of person, and not being able to have access to like the students' records and be able to just pick up the phone and like, okay, I can go into this platform at work and find out their mom's phone number and call them right away. Like not having that kind of thing. I may have known it, but I just wish I would have been more mentally prepared to kind of handle that, because parents and families are vital to my work that I do with kids. And so that disconnect was kind of a bit, but otherwise it's been okay.
Yeah, I love that too, because I do feel like we had to be real creative on how we're going to continue to maintain relationships with parents and let them know that we are bought into the idea of their child being successful. Even though we're not there, we can't give them the high fives, we can't give them the handshakes, we can't give them the pat on the back. We are still very much rooting for your child to experience success in the classroom. And so we're going to make ourselves as accessible as possible. So sometimes that looks like having office hours. Sometimes that looks like sending newsletters out more often than we would have typically have sent them out, having a texting tree, having opportunities to hop on the phone with your families, although you might be all over the time zone. So it might feel a little bit different for you to be able to do that, but getting creative as to what it looks like to maintain those relationships and let them know that we might not be physically in the same place, but mentally we want the same thing. So I think that that's really important for us to be able to convey to those families. Thanks for bringing that up. Any other thoughts on this slide?
So for me, I'm just kind of piggybacking a little bit on that, is I really wish that I had more access to the parent information that was updated and in the system, so that when I communicate with their students, as I do frequently via email or via Remind or whatever, that I could reach out to them and say, hey, so-and-so is doing a really great job, you know, but maybe he's missing this work. So if you could maybe see if he could get it turned in. But really, I really miss sometimes being able to just send a parent a message and say, hey, look, your student is doing a really awesome job. Thank you. I just wanted to tell you that I appreciate you.
And so relationship, it's the core of everything we're doing. Well, have you guys identified key factors that may increase the educational potential of students of color to enroll in and graduate from a higher ed institution? What are we seeing here?
I actually used to work in an adult education program back in New Mexico. And as part of that, I would see a lot of access to resources. So, and not access to resources, here you go, here's the resources, but the follow-on support from that as well. I was very lucky at a time where a new director had come in and she wanted to completely rebuild the program. And we started a C3 program where we were going around and we would teach, the colleges how we could obviously improve those resources and support for communities of color specifically, because that's the area that we came from, and also students in rural areas as well. So you would find that they wouldn't have access to those resources, or maybe know how to use them correctly, because someone can give me a pile of paperwork and go, here you go, it's all the resources you need. You can apply for all these scholarships and grants. You won't have to pay anything, but until truly someone sits down with you and go over that. And as I said, this new director was definitely changing that. She was bringing more staff support in, being able to have one-on-one mentorships. We ended up, when I left, unfortunately I moved, we got orders, but by this time she had 3 advisors who would book an appointment time with them, sit them down one-on-one and help them work through those resources. So that was a great, and she's only building it up. I see her all the time, I chat to her all the time about things. It's good.
That's awesome. I'm hearing 2 things there. One is the idea of exposure, letting people know that these things exist, these tools exist, these resources exist, these scholarships exist. Did you know there's a school for this thing that you love, but nobody told you could study as an adult? Like, there are absolutely this idea or misconception of what college might mean. College is for people who want to be doctors, lawyers, and teachers. And it is so much more than that. So if we can start to increase awareness around what is available for you in higher ed, and that it's not just the academics, there are vocational studies available as well that are going to make you just as successful as a human being. And so we need to make sure that they understand all of that exists. And then also what you had said is kind of break down some of those barriers, like, how do I apply for a student loan? When do I know that a student loan is right for me? How can I apply for a scholarship? Where do I find those scholarships? How long in advance do I need to make these applications happen before the day I actually want to start? So there's just having this roadmap for students who have never had that person in their life to walk them through some of these things before. First generation college students, they've got a lot on their plate. So I was a first generation college student and figured it out with the help of guidance counselors and parents who were able to invest more in me at the time. And there are a lot of different variables for people, but being able to I think what you said, create the exposure and then provide that guidance along the way. Very important. Lisa, Melanie, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I wanted to add to that, and someone put something very important in the chat about life skills, and I'm glad, April, that you mentioned about there being more than one option, because higher ed, collecting student debt, we know is a big issue. And so if that is not the route for that student, I believe that mentorship, and Catherine talked about that at the end of her talk, about how important it is to have that mentorship and make sure that literally no child is left without a roadmap to decide what it is they want to do. But if we are thinking about how to strategically use social emotional learning within the framework of our teaching and learning, we take students through the journey of identity and belonging. They get to know more about themselves. So many of our young people and even adults don't really know what their strengths are or the places where they want to grow. And until you can understand that, it's going to be harder for you to figure out if college or a vocational school is better. So I have a 15-year-old, and she's shown interest in culinary arts. She's shown interest in pre-med. So I put her in different groups just how she likes. So we're not liking culinary arts right now. We're thinking of pre-med. And so she's in a mentorship group for that with other Black and brown students who look like her, from Black doctors, that can let her know that this is accessible to you and people who look like you. And I also think that it's important for us, like you said, to think about exposure. I take kids, I've gotten back to doing it now. I've taken kids on HBCU college tours. So for those who don't know, those are historically Black colleges and universities, and getting our students to understand that even if you are not at a space where you feel like you're competitive or whatever, none of that has to matter. Really unpacking this idea, industrialized complex of education producing robots, because our kids are seeing that YouTube is making money. They're seeing going viral is the way to go. So we can't convince them of the old narrative of you must go to college to get the degree, to get the job, because there are other avenues now that they are seeing. So we've got to create an environment where we're able to help them to form whomever it is they want to be, but also let them know that you are in a journey of life where you will always be becoming, and it may change. You may want to be this and explore this, and then you may want to be that. That's the beauty of life. It's exploration and curiosity. So I think if we accept that and put that into our classrooms, then we can give our students a leg up to let them know you can explore what you want to be, but first you need to see who it is that you really are and the values that you bring to the world.
So well put. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Let's go to that next one. Are there parts of virtual instruction that are not helping the need to provide equitable access to students of color? Lisa, would you like to start this one?
I would, thank you. So I think there are parts of virtual instruction that don't work for everybody, right? We already know that we have different types of learners. I, for instance, am a kinesthetic learner. My children are kinesthetic learners, but I also I can listen and write things down. The lack of paper, I think, is kind of problematic for some of these kids, and not because they're not tech savvy, because they are. It's just that they have a harder time getting it done in the time period that they're expected to get it done. And so it puts a lot of pressure on them, and it stresses them out, and it just kind of leads to frustration that is hard to pull back from.
Yeah, so funny that you say that. I'm here with my teacher notepad, writing down all of the stuff that we're talking about. It's shaped like a light bulb. So I totally get the lack of paper. One thing I would encourage educators to do, though, when you start to feel that way, what are we really good at? We are really good at being flexible. And when we recognize students are having a problem with something, we are going to start to brainstorm. What are all the ways that we can work with you so that we will mitigate this problem? It doesn't mean we always get to eliminate it, but we're going to do everything we can because this is the situation that we're in, and we want you to be as successful as possible. And so sometimes that means that we do some creative problem solving. But yeah, I totally agree. There is not a one size fits all for education. I think there should be options and opportunities for students to figure out where they fit in best. And we need to do a better job as educators as we continue to evolve what this industry looks like, we need to evolve what delivery of instruction looks like, because for some students, they are thriving in the virtual world. These are kiddos who might have been left behind or fallen through the cracks, and now they have the opportunity to progress through their education, oftentimes at their own pace. They have the opportunity to pause lectures and let it sink in and listen to something again, when before, if you missed a lecture for a dentist appointment, you were done. If you didn't have a friend you trusted to take notes, too bad, you lost the learning for the day. But now we have the opportunity to listen to that learning on our own time, have it repeated for us. So there are some students who are absolutely thriving in this, but we know there are some who are not as well. And so I think what those students, when we start to notice, we're starting to lose engagement, or we're starting to see discipline issues, we're starting to see behavioral issues, that's the time where we need to start coming up with creative solutions for those kiddos specifically. Anybody else want to add to this one?
I mean, you can go back to basics and say those students that don't have the opportunity for internet and computers in the world that we are currently living in, I like to call it the pandemic time, districts are having to provide those things. Not everybody has access to the internet. One of the districts that I worked in actually built remote Wi-Fi vehicles. They built 6 buses that they could take out into the local communities. But again, not every district has that opportunity or those money resources to be able to provide that to students. I don't think we realize there is a large amount of students in the communities that don't have access to technology and internet, and that is where we would be losing that equitable access.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much. And next question, what professional development session or topic would you recommend other virtual administrators or educators explore? So we'll just do this like a quick popcorn style. Catherine, something that has come to mind as a professional development session or topic you recommend?
Not specific, but ed tech. Keep on top of it, look at the new resources that are coming out, play with them, try it with the kids and see what they like and don't like.
Perfect. Thank you, Lisa.
Whiteboard chat. For those students that do struggle with the paper and pen thing, whiteboard chat I have found helps tremendously, just getting there, because you do it all together as a class and you can see all their work as it's being done and they get the grade and they don't have to worry about it.
Perfect. Thank you. Melanie.
To learn more about that, Lisa. I think culturally responsive teaching and social emotional learning is a must. If we're going to talk about equity, we have to make sure that the teachers have the mindset and framework to be culturally responsive to all diverse communities and to naturally embed SEL, not as a separate thing, but as a natural part of the learning process.
Love it. Thank you. All right, y'all. I think this is our last question. When you encounter a challenge in virtual education, where do you go to find solutions? We'll start with you, Melanie.
I like YouTube always. That's just a favorite. That's kind of really where I go, is to YouTube. Or if there's something like with PLI related, I needed help with Nearpod, and they always have the open office sessions or coffee room breaks and other things like that. So if there's a resource available through PLI, which I really do appreciate, so many resources being available and the consistent help. So either YouTube is my first go, just to figure it out on my own, but if not, somebody's got a coffee room open I can jump into.
So good. Thank you. Lisa, where are you going?
Library. One of those places I like to go when I really get stuck, but I will go to the school's websites and see what resources they have in their library and what they're using for their students who are brick and mortar. Obviously Nearpod is a favorite, and of course my PLI colleagues are the best. So
thanks. Catherine, where are you going for problems?
My team, when I found out who my team members were, I created a Google chat with them, invited them all in, and we chat every day, we brainstorm, and then obviously we have our PLC meetings once a week too. So that's, I'm very blessed to have an awesome team who all support each other.
So good. So I'm going to throw one out there. I love to confer with students, because I feel like oftentimes if I'm having a challenge, who knows technology better than young people? So I will ask them, can you tell me where to do this, where to find this? Not only am I going to likely get the right answer, but also I'm letting them know that you have so much to teach other people. Like, I am allowing the students to feel the sense of empowerment that they might not have had the opportunity to experience before. It is giving them authority. It is letting them know that, yeah, your teacher doesn't know it all. And sometimes it's really great to have the students feel this, oh my goodness, I think I just told an adult what to do. So I love being able to get my students involved. I also think it's a great idea when you're teaching to pin your students sometimes and let them teach class to their peers. That's another way where we can allow, there's no better way to learn something than to teach it, right? And so we're letting them continue to grow in their learning experiences, but we are also having their peers learn from them, which is also very powerful. And they have this sense of accomplishment. We're increasing their confidence. I mean, talk about embedding SEL in a really organic way. And you can also remind them when we start to narrate what's going on, like, we've got a great growth mindset, which is allowing us to continue to persevere when this challenge feels like we can't overcome it, or we know that this was a really tough day, but we have resiliency, so we are going to come right back even stronger. And so when we narrate some of those things, it doesn't mean we're doing direct teach SEL, it means we're connecting the dots for those students. And so I felt like that might have been a bit of a tangent, but I'm so glad we had this conversation. Dr. Battles and Ms. Tafoya and Ms. Graven, this thought leadership conversation was phenomenal. I'm so excited we had the opportunity to chat today. I do want to go to the Q&A board just for a moment. We have a few questions that if anybody would like to chime in, you all don't have to answer all of these, but whenever you're ready, you can just unmute and chime in. One question is anyone having trouble engaging African-American students with PLI virtual learning Canvas modules? And what are you doing to solve problems with students who are not engaging?
Yes, they can be repetitive and very lecture-like. So what I tend to do is add things into those resources, Kahoot. But my favorite at the minute is BlueKit, BLOOKET, and GymKit. They are new resources like Kahoot, but it turns them into a virtual video game. So they are learning while playing a video game. I'm tricking them. My fourth graders are like, we're playing another game. And I'm like, we're learning cause and effect. So that's really engaging my students.
Would you
My
mind
favorite's BlueKit over GymKit because of the cost. So BlueKit has kind of a longer free period than the GymKit does.
Cool. Would you mind just dropping those into the chat so everybody can?
Yep.
And did Lisa, would you like to respond to that?
I use Nearpods a lot because it gets them to interact. Again, whiteboard chat is a favorite, Kahoots, Quizlets, Brain Pop is another one. It's the one of those fun little games that they like to play. And they really get into the Kahoot. So if I tell them that we're going to have a Kahoot after we have a video lesson, like one of those crash course lessons, then they are all about it and they are paying attention and they're on it.
Love it. I would also just like to say, as amazing as resources can be, I think that resources alone won't solve your problems. I think it absolutely is a combination of resources and relationships. If they do not feel you are showing up for them, they will not show up for you. And it doesn't matter how many games you play, you need to be able to have that connection with students, let them know you care for them, you love them, you want them to be successful, you are going to support them in everything that it takes, and that you will stay on top of them for accountability. Like, I'm checking in on you because I want you to know how much I care. And when you continue to do that, that's when they'll start to show up. Now that they're showing up, you do need to engage them, but I don't feel like you're going to have the opportunity to engage them with something fun until they know why you're there. Perfect. Thank you guys for continuing to drop in resources in the chat. Let's go to another question. It says, the next question is very similar to what we had just talked about, making the human connection with students. I'm going to go to another one. How do I use whiteboard chat? I feel like we would probably have to do a demo, and unfortunately we're running a little short on time. So we're going to ask you to perhaps Google that one or YouTube it and see what we can find. Another question is anyone successful with getting students to show their faces on camera, and what are you doing?
I'll go in on this one because I've seen the struggle when the pandemic first started, where teachers were so bent on the cameras need to be on, I need to see your faces. And then it becomes a question of compliance and control. And one thing about the human brain, I'm reading something now, The Art of Changing the Brain by James Zoll. And control is one of the big things: cognition, control, fear, and pleasure, which are four of the functions of the brain. And so the student needs to feel like they are in control. So I had this happen last week with a group of kids I've had since the beginning of the school year, but they have just decided, I said, well, I'd appreciate it if everyone would turn on their cameras. I'd love to see your faces. And I left it alone. The one came on. Thank you so much, Ariana, for turning on your camera. I appreciate that. I really do. Another one came on. Thank you, Mark, for doing that. Just recognize, and then everybody's camera came on. I didn't have to make a big tirade about it or get into a whole argument or discussion, but let them know that I really need to see you. I would love to see your faces. I tell them that they're beautiful people. That's how I greet them. Good morning, beautiful people, every day. And so them knowing that I say I love you at the end. I mean, that's not your thing, whatever, but that's how I roll with my kids. So they know I love them. They know I'm here for them, and we have a great relationship. And they turn on the cameras for me. They pretty much do most things I ask them: liberation, and I give them freedom in the classrooms to be themselves. And I don't worry about that compliance and control. The relationship first, and then they'll do the things that needs to be done once you have the relationship. But we
So
got to let go of that control factor. It's not going to work.
yeah, absolutely. Daniel Pink, if anybody hasn't read, his stuff is not really that new. It's been around for decades, but talks about what motivates human beings. And it's very much what we were just talking about. And so there are some cute YouTube videos that also do you've seen how they illustrate while somebody's talking, there's like a marker board happening. So there's some really great ones for Daniel Pink's content. And so that's great for teachers to understand how to reach students. Anything else you guys would like to make? Any closing remarks? Is there anything that you felt like, oh, I wish we would have talked about this and we didn't? Feeling good?
No, I think it was a really, really good conversation. I don't know. I enjoyed the conversation. I appreciate this platform for even having this opportunity to talk about this. And I just want people to be willing to even do the work outside of what proximity provides. I know, like when we were in brick and mortar schools, we all got a curriculum. But if you're anything like me and a lot of other teachers, we were pulling other stuff in all the time. And so even though proximity does provide a lot of resources, don't be afraid to bring in other tools that you know will work and that are culturally responsive to your kids, because proximity is doing a good job, but they don't know your kids like you know your kids. So you can bring in other resources that are still teaching to the standards, but that are really cultivating the genius of our students, particularly our Black and Brown students and other students of color.
So well put. Thank you so much, Melanie.
For me, I loved having this conversation. I would thank you so much for having me be here. It really is about making connections, and being a social studies teacher, it is so important for them to understand once you can connect the past to the present, it really clicks for them. And so, especially for students of color, and they start seeing and they start paying attention more and they start becoming more engaged because they get interested in what's happening now versus what was happening then, and they see the similarities and the differences. And it's really an amazing thing to see when that light bulb goes on.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. It was a pleasure being able to speak with you all today. I had such an incredible panel. You guys offered so many great insights. And we're also grateful to everybody who attended and was very active in the chat. So guys, we appreciate your time today. Please know this is recorded. We will also be sharing the recording with you. And it is time to announce the winner of our gift card. We had our moderator pull the name, and it is, I hope I say your name correctly, Alicia Guinot. Alicia Guinot, I hope that's how you say your name, and you will be receiving an email with the instructions on redeeming your gift card. Everybody else, we hope to see you back again for our next PLI webinar. I hope you all have a beautiful rest of your day. Thanks so much.